For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. I've been fishing around in my memory for a story I heard about the French Revolution. Some of you history buffs may be able to help me out with this later. It may or may not be true, but there's a story that in the course of the French Revolution, as people were assembling in the streets to riot, a very clever city official came into the throng and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure some of you are here by mistake, that you have not come to make trouble today, but just happen to find yourselves in a group of rabble-rousers. Please feel free to go home." I was thinking of that when I heard today's gospel passage, when Jesus said, "You know that the Gentiles, when they come into authority, lord it over those they have under them. You know that they do that sort of thing. The Gentiles, the other people, do that sort of thing," when in fact James and John have just done it. James and John, in a story that's replicated in other Gospels, actually they use their mother in one instance, but not in Mark, not today. James and John come up to Jesus. First question, incredibly gutsy. "Would you do for us whatever we ask?" So Jesus kind of, well, depends on what it's going to be. So what is it you want? And they say, "Give us, me James, me John, to sit at your right hand and your left when you come into your glory." So there's a little compliment slid into that. "We know you're coming into your glory, so when you get there, can we have the best seats?" Of course, only the Gentiles would do such a thing, right? It makes the other 10 angry. It makes the other 10 angry. And Jesus has just put his finger on the problem of ambition. Guess what? It exists in religious communities. Christians get ambitious, and they jockey for position. They sometimes actually elbow one another aside. Chutzpah, they say in Yiddish, but it does exist inside communities of faith and spiritual communities, and it was an important enough issue that Jesus talked about it over and over and over again. The Gentiles do it that way. When they come into authority, they lord it over other people, but it is not that way with you. With you, the one who wants to be the first must be the servant, the helper of all. The one who would be first among you, and he actually uses the word doula, or slave, which is like a domestic house servant. The one who wants to be the best among you must be the maid. Okay? That's the stratification of position in the kingdom of heaven. No jockeying for position. No, he got a better seat than I did. No, well, she really needs to get an award. No, saying, gosh, nobody ever thanked me. No, we're not to compete with one another, except perhaps in self-sacrifice and in good deeds. Oh, this is hard for people in our culture. You can hear the poor self-esteem bells ringing, can't you? Oh, she never says no. She's such a good person. She's dying. We need to have sufficient self-esteem to say yes and to mean it, to make promises and keep them. But where does such self-esteem come from? Jesus is not saying, treat yourselves like dirt. He's saying this is the best way to lead. If your ambition is true, go to the bottom of the pile and stop comparing yourselves with one another and stop paying attention to whether you get the promotion, the reward, the thank you letter, the letters from grateful children. Let it go. Move the locus of your self-respect away from what other people think of you. It might not be as far as you think. Move that center of gravity to what God thinks of you. That's scary. Number one, because it's kind of abstract. I mean, how do you know, right? I mean, is God sort of daily going, oh, attaboy, got it, that was really great. Actually, God tends to be a little quiet in terms of thanking us for what we've done. But if you've ever heard God thank you, you will realize that it kind of knocks you down. I will tell you a personal story. Many, many years ago, I had a dear friend who was getting married. Actually, I was maid of honor in her wedding. She was wearing a Victorian, fussy little bride's dress, and she needed special undergarments to go under this bride's dress. And look, we were graduate students on the Upper West Side. We didn't know what we were doing. We went to Bloomingdale's. You know Bloomingdale's, where you get on that escalator and feel really ugly by the time you get to the top because there are mirrors on both sides? Yeah, we went to Bloomingdale's. Like, oh my goodness, what are we doing here? And we got into the lingerie section, the better lingerie section, and I found myself running back and forth with undergarments for my friend. And she successfully found something that A, she could afford, and B, would work. The next day on my way to church on the bus up Amsterdam Avenue, I swear to God, I heard God say, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." Are you kidding? Right? I was a seminarian. I was preparing to be a priest. I get thanks for this, you know? We bought a bra, you know? Well done, thou good and faithful servant. I never forgot it, because it's the kind of service that Jesus wants from us. Remember, he drove the point home at the Last Supper when he crawled around the table on his knees to wash the feet of his disciples. Boy, were they upset. Peter had a cow. Come back Maundy Thursday, you'll hear the full story. He said, if you're going to be a follower of me, be a follower of me. I came here to serve, not to be served. If you're going to be a follower of Jesus, do what Jesus does, which is to serve. No more competition. But Jesus is also saying that actually this is the way to lead. This is the way to lead. Now, the easy takeaway of that is that sort of heavy lies the head that wears the crown. You know, the head of the household may well be the person who turns out the lights at night. Why? Because he sees the electricity bill, right? The person who wraps his or her arms around that responsibility may in fact find himself unplugging toilets, relighting boilers, doesn't matter if he's CEO, right? Or drying the tears of a receptionist on his way into the office because something bad really happened in her life. You have to go there. You have to go there. And we have to wean ourselves away from what other people think. No score, no points rating, no voter dial-in like American Idol. Hooray, hooray, best Christian ever. She got 85 points today. We don't get that. We don't get that. You've got to be willing to move into that dark and sort of empty space where you actually don't know. Because spiritual progress is so difficult to measure. Are you a better person of faith today than where you were 2 weeks ago? How would you know? Because it's an infinite journey. Do we know if we're closer or better? it's hard to get a handle on those things, so it's only natural for us to compare ourselves to other people. Well, I don't know if I'm any better than I was, but I'm better than her, right? We look for these external rewards because it's so hard to get a handhold in there. Are we getting better? Are we getting it right? Are we loving more? Is the love getting through? Is it making a difference? Those of you who teach, do you know how long it takes to realize whether the child is actually getting it? It takes years. So we set the praise and blame aside, or take it with a grain of salt, and remember that our very existence on the earth is a pleasure to the God who created us. If we anchor our respect for ourselves and our self-esteem, Lord, I get tired of that phrase sometimes, we anchor that in God's amazing love for us. Because God made us, created us, has a huge stake in us, bigger than anyone else. God has a huge stake in us and loves us. I learned an exercise some years ago when you're feeling sort of low about yourself. They said, just go back in your memory, find somebody in your memory who was always glad to see you. It was my Aunt Marie. It didn't matter what I did. Anything I did was wonderful. If I walked into a room, that was wonderful. Right? That's God's attitude toward us because God made us. The love that a mother shows to her newborn infant has got nothing on the loving gaze with which God watches us. And God is on our side, not so that we defeat the others, but so that we can get where we're going, so that we can do the good thing. And yes, people will love us because we've loved them. I was really struck by this yesterday when we buried Claire Dickerson, who was senior warden of Christ Church in a very difficult era. It was one of the few times, actually, that any eulogy is referred to a person's professional life. If you go to as many funerals as I do, you realize how seldom a person's success in business is mentioned. Almost never. Corporate accomplishment? Never. I never hear it in a eulogy. A professional colleague of Claire's, though, came to deliver a tribute at the beginning, and the thing that we all remember was that 20 years before it came to public attention, the condition of child laborers in India was on her mind. That was the piece of her professional work that shone out. The rest of it, the rest of the praise and the thanks and the eulogies is about people's self-sacrifice. The dad who took on a second job to put food on the table. The woman who took extra turns in the carpool. Believe me, it's all about what people did for other people, and it pours out in funerals. It pours out. But we just have to get to that spot. And it may, sometimes I pray it's like when a good physical trainer comes to you or a yoga teacher and says, actually, it's just that little muscle right there. Get your eyes off yourself and onto somebody you can help. That's all you need to do. It's actually a smaller change than you realize. We just shift that little point of gravity just ever so slightly so that you're serving rather than looking in the mirror. Right there. You've got it. It's remembered and taught in every significant spiritual tradition that we need to serve one another, to stop worrying about where we stand or what our rank might be. And so to close, I'm actually going to give you a passage from Taoism, from Lao Tzu. I bet some of you read this in college. The best, like water, benefit all and do not compete. They dwell in lowly spots that everyone else scorns. Putting others before themselves, they find themselves in the foremost place and come very near to the Tao. In their dwelling, they love the earth. In their heart, they love what is deep. In personal relationships, they love kindness. In their words, they love truth. In the world, they love peace. In personal affairs, they love what is right. It is because they do not compete with others that they are beyond the reproach of the world. And Jesus said, "Whoever wishes to become great among you must be your servant."